The objective is to, with all these processes, is to build a ladder. Each process I tried to explain is a rung in the ladder. And my goal is to build the ladder as high as possible, right? So when they say action, I jump. And what you can find, and what I found in drama school, where you're supposed to fail, even at work, you're supposed to fail, right? Is that sometimes you don't build the ladder high enough, right? And so you get to the middle of the movie and you splat, right? You don't have enough in there. But you build it higher, higher, higher. Again, Jacob's ladder. You're building it higher, 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 higher. They say action, you jump, right? And hopefully when they say cut, you haven't hit the ground. You know what I mean? Because when you hit the ground, you're acting.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Jonathan Majors is an actor. He sat down with me on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to talk about the work.
Is there a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process when you get the role? Is there a typical first step? I know that you have a long process that you have to do generally. But is the first step important to lay this foundation?
All of this goes back to, as far as process is concerned. So I went to North Carolina School of the Arts, and then I matriculated into Yale School of Drama. And I love those programs. I always say that North Carolina School of the Arts had me at the rawest, right? I was 19 years old. I just turned 19 years old when I started the program. I auditioned for the program when I was 18 years old. So North Carolina School of the Arts had the rawest version of my instrument. And then after 4 years there, I went to the city, did some work. Then I went to Yale. And Yale took the work that I had done at NCSA and deepened it and also elevated it. But it was at Yale that I met a man named Budi Takuma Miller. His given name at the time when I met him was Aule. And he had this idea of this thing called Taksu. And Taksu, you want to go there? We're going to go there.
We gotta go there.
Taksu is this understanding within the Balinese culture that there is a energy that performers have to have in order to step onto the stage. Now, their primary reason for doing this, or the primary instrument or art form that you see this in, that I connected to, was this thing called potang, right? And that is Balinese dance. And we went to train in that. And this idea of Taksu is essentially a spiritual element, right? And a big part of that is preparation. And so in order for Taksu to come in, right, there has to be this process. The space has to be enlivened, the space that you're working in. All of this, like film is what? Almost 100 years old now, right? So all of this is based off of ancient theater practices, right? So I then translated it into film for myself. But the space had to be charged. The preparation of the material had to be charged 100%. And then the instrument itself had to be charged 100%. And so we use that through the masks. The mask culture there is extravagant and beautiful and in many ways native, right? It's how they move, right? And so in order to do that, the instrument has to be prepared, right? How does the instrument get prepared? Well, through training, right? Physically, emotionally, vocally, all these things are mandatory, right? Very much, to make a comparison, it's very much like Grotowski, right? You know, Grotowski was known for having his company run around the theater and yoga and all these things. Yoga is also connected to Stanislavski. So we had all these things, the late work of Stanislavski. We also had, that was a big understanding, you're essentially exhausted, right, before you start the work. But you exhaust these instruments, right, so that the social body is is at its most malleable in order for the preparation of the text to come through. Now, the text we'll use for this example is Shakespeare, right? Because Shakespeare has a very clear form, right? And you have to understand the form, very much like the dance. It's not just dancing. There are traditional movements that you have to do, right? The masks that we work in that are carved from the mask maker, right? The mask maker takes this tree, prays at the tree, takes out, asks the tree if it can have a piece of it. It then grants it or doesn't grant it, and then they then take that and they then go over an image and they build the mask, right? And then there's the space. The space has to be charged. How do you charge the space? Well, certain places are charged. Like for instance, where we're sitting right now, when we walked in, and you told me what you were doing and how this space is in some ways sacred, right? It has to be a sacred space. So I took all of that, right? 5 years of training with him. I took all of that. I also worked with him deeply on the films we did, in which I actually worked with Booty, were a picture I did called The Harder They Fall, my TV series Lovecraft Country, and Kang, right? Specifically, the first variant of Kang, right, in Quantumania, that version. This latest picture, I did not, Creed, I did not actually have masks made in Bali. I just used some of the masks I already had, as well as incorporating my own work into it. So to answer your question, the first thing I do is I print the script, right? I have a tangible texture of the script, right? And the printing of it is a thing. I schedule it. I'm going to go print this script off, right? I don't work on a script from an iPad or a phone or anything. I print the script. And the reading of it is, and this is of course after I've already agreed to do the role, right? However, when the role comes, I read the script initially on paper, right? And I do a second read once I know I'm going to do it. And that is very much, I have a certain tea, I have a certain place I like to sit, I have certain music I'm listening to. And that is just to keep my instrument open. So as I read the script, as I pour over the script, as I do my, all the things you learn, the craft of acting, right? The operative words, the beats, the mini beats, all these things, the objectives, all of that. But before I do any of that, I'm reading it with a very clear intention. And then from there, like that is the first thing I do for every picture, right? I get the script, I print it off, and I read it. I look at the title. I read all this. I read all the film directions, all the stage directions. I read all of it. And then from there, the next thing I do is I'll leave it alone, and then I'll sit and I'll very quickly start writing. Oh, and I buy a journal. Each piece has a journal, right? So if you look in me and my wife's home, I have all these moleskins or whatever, which is a old hat that I got from drama school. But I have all these journals which literally have the process of what it is I'm doing. I look at the title. Titles change, right? But I believe that the title that is given, right, was given, right? I think we spoke briefly about it, the acting process being mystical. I completely believe in that. That is the one thing that is missing from our traditional classical training, right? We don't talk about that.
Right.
And we definitely don't teach it. You know what I mean? Like we don't teach that. We leave all of that out, which I think is we do the actor a huge disservice because how can everybody's writing about something greater. The biggest super objective, right, is the top of Jacob's ladder, right? That's something I understand and something I believe, right? Divinity. Now you can get to that divinity through, being a boxing champ, by being a bodybuilder, by being you're trying to reach something that is transcendent. And so I believe if you're trying to reach something that's transcendent, the traffic goes both ways. If I'm going that way, clearly a source came down, right, in order to inspire my writers, my directors, even my castmates that decide to do the piece, to jump into it. So that's what I'm trying to divide at first. And then I do this thing called a soul chart, right? And a soul chart is, like, these things happen with every project, right? I do a soul chart where I begin to look at the piece and I just, oh yeah, okay, cool. If we're talking about boxing, if we're talking about bodybuilding, let's focus on magazine dreams. Bodybuilding, food, weights, pawpaw, all of these things begin to pop out, and I begin to categorize what it is they are, right? And as I go through the script, I slowly break it down into maybe 3 to 4 soul lily pads, right? Or attachments, right? This character cares a lot about bodybuilding, okay? Cares a lot about pawpaw, cares a lot about Vanderhorn, right? His idol, right? Cares a lot about, or not cares a lot about, but is occupied a lot with wellness, right? And then so these things then, to me, live in a certain part of the body and then have a certain emotional life. And so once I've done that, and that takes about a week, right? Because it's every noun. It's every noun.
And are you reading the script over again to
I'm
get
reading
more
it
out?
over
Yeah.
and over and over again. In the margins, I'm writing out what those things are. And then I begin to kind of set that up. And I go, okay, cool. These are the 4 things that I'm in love with, right? These are the 4 things that are absolutely a part of my being. And once I have that set up, the emotionality of those things become clear, right? Pawpaw is the heart chakra, right? I'm there. And then you realize that you say, you know, something as simple as sweater, right? Sweater seems so out in the world, but no, sweater is connected to pawpaw. So when I say sweater, I'm connecting it to pawpaw. And that's the word I'm working in, right? And so I'll pour over the script multiple times and kind of doing that. And then once I have this soul chart, I kind of put the script away and begin to kind of marinate on these things and try to figure out where they live. A big part of my process is not to get it into my brain, right? Not to get the words into my brain, not to get the character into my brain, but to get into my nervous system. Because a big part of one of my philosophies of acting is I want this to feel like a documentary.
Yeah.
I want every character I'm playing to feel like, wait, is that real? Right? And that's because a part of my idea as an actor is that we have a responsibility to the audience. You know, one of the things I say is it's for the homies, right? And everybody's the homie, right? If you have a pawpaw, if you ever wanted to be a bodybuilder, if you've ever suffered from any type of mental illness, these are the people who are going to know the validity of the performance.
As soon as you said sweater, I thought of my dad's sweater.
That's good.
It's more than a sweater.
Yeah.
It's there's so much connection, and I almost could cry just thinking.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And so if you gotta, in the scene, right? If you gotta do that, like that's why it's amazing, right? Because it's not just, you're not just saying something. There's so much else in there. It's coming from your nervous system.
Like it does in real life.
Right.
Like it does in real life.
Right.
So that's the first step. Then the next step, like we talk about production. So I very quickly tried to find the costume, right? And I try to find the costume as fast as I can because I don't believe in costumes, right?
What does that mean?
I try to, maybe it's a trick, but I want it to be real.
Yeah.
Right? And so, for instance,
I know what you mean.
In any movie I've done, you know, or TV show that I've done, I very quickly begin to inhabit the clothes of them, right? And I've been fortunate enough to work with, you know, very caring and trusting directors that go, all right, cool, you know? And so I'll be sitting, you know, with my director at lunch in costume, right? And all of a sudden there's stains on the costume, and now it's not on costume. Now it's my clothes.
Yeah.
And if it's my clothes, then of course, now I'm transitioning myself into this character, right? No one likes to wear someone else's clothes. You're pretending,
right?
You know,
right?
And I don't want to do that, you know. And it's not that I don't want to do that; it's that I can't do that because of the mission, right? I want you to know that I have put work in, I have put time in, right, to try to bring something to the screen that you feel is authentically a representation of your part of humanity. If I'm successful at that, who knows? But the try is everything, you know? And the process, like, again, I've been doing this since James Bundy at the Yale School of Drama really broke out this chart beat. He and Evan Yanulis, who I think is now the head of drama at Juilliard. You know, I've been kind of in and out, so I don't know if she's still there, but but I think she's there still. And then of course, you know, then we can get into like the work of Ron Van Loo, right? You know, who has touched so many of us, right? So there are no props, there are no costumes, none of that is real. That's industry, right? That's production. I'm not here for production. I'm here to tell the story, which also bleeds into, you know, early days when I'm auditioning, right? One of the things I say to a lot of young actors, or even actors in general, don't audition. Don't audition. It's your coverage, right? This is your time to tell your story through this playwright, screenwriter, through their world, right? And you get one shot at it, you know? Do your coverage. Show them what it is you want to express. And when you do that, there's no paper. Who has paper on set? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Have you ever watched a movie where the actor had this? That never happens, right? So you practice how you play, right? Which goes back to my athletic days, right? You practice how you play.
Yeah.
And you play how you practice, right? It's accoutrement that to me could be a handicap.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because ultimately you've got to jump and let, you know, this mystical thing kind of carry you and move you through, right?
Yeah.
I call that thing the Holy Spirit, God, Taksu, right? All of these things are incorporated.
You said that Gerald Friedman, right?
Yeah.
He was the
Dean at North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yep.
He said he's not preparing you for acting.
That's
he's
right.
preparing you for life.
That's right.
This goes into what you're saying right now, right? Which this is not about. It's not about pretend. It's about embodying. And the other thing is you have to empty yourself.
Correct.
In order to inhabit. Because you have things, we all have things that are habits, things that make up us that are overpowering. And if they're too strong, then the things can't come in and you can't embody.
That's right.
But when you go down this road of doing this,
that has to do with the exhaustion now, right? With having the body, and then now we can talk about just like technical things, Alexander technique, right? When you go to your unsocialized spine, right, which is your spine of Eden, right? The way you've emptied yourself out, right? Some guys, some girls hunch over because that's what they do in regular life. That's not what the Alexander technique is asking you to do. It's asking you to come back to your natural Eden self, right? And then from there, you don't have habits, right? Then you do that after running 2 miles around the set, right? Either keeping your breath going. That's the thing about breath work, right? I have a pattern of breathing. You have a pattern of breathing. Those patterns of breathing are different from the character's patterns of breathing. So the best way to do that is what? You have to disrupt it, right? You have to disrupt it. And then when you come back to it and I begin to think and speak the language on it, which is why knowing your lines is so important, right? Knowing the sound of the moment, rather, is so important because that is going to tell you how this guy or gal speaks, right? If you don't see a period for 30, right now we're like Bernard Shaw, right? If you don't see a period for the next, 4 lines, right? That's a big breath, right? Which means your character has to be able to, that is their natural costume, right? Their breathing costume. Jessica Wolf, my teacher at where's Jessica? Yeah, Yale, brought that to our attention. The breathing costume, right? So you begin to change all of it from the inside out.
It seems like that if you do this, like you're saying, then you are almost as much of a writer as the writer is, because you're when you have to make decisions about, for instance, like what you just said about the breath, about which breath pattern this person has.
That's right.
But you're saying it's in the text.
It's in the text. It's always in the text. You have an inclination, right? You have an instinct, and you have to trust that instinct, right? Like for instance, there's always you try to get back to the germ of the character, and the best thing you can do is, like, if you ever meet the writer doesn't speak the way the protagonist is speaking, right? That came from someplace else, right? And so I very much just give in to that, right? Okay, so these are short sentences. This guy says yes, no, all these things, right? Is it because he can't take a deep breath? Why can't he take a deep breath, right? And I begin to investigate that. And so I'll demonstrate. So like with Did you get to see Magazine Dreams by any chance? Yeah.
Yes.
So with Magazine Dreams, you'll notice that Killian Maddox holds his shoulders up. As big as he is, he holds his shoulders up, which changes my breathing costume, right? And so when he gets to a line it's fitting, it goes, oh yeah, that's all he can say, right? And then something happens where he tries to speak for a longer period of time, trying to express a longer thought. What's going to happen then, right? How is he going to work that out in his costume? Maybe he has to go before he speaks, right? But you don't change that. You don't go, oh, that's unattractive, I'm not going to do that. No, you do that because that is the character.
Right.
And then let's just jump quickly to, because it's a craft, right? It's also a craft. You then look, I just begin to look around and say, okay, cool. If I'm a bodybuilder, let me just go watch some bodybuilders, right? What do they have in common? Okay, that is the decorum, right, of a bodybuilder, right? If I see about 3 to 4 people do the same thing, that's decorum, right? And I mark that. This has to happen, right? Then you have these things such as now we're talking about Brecht, right? Liz Diamond at the Yale School of Drama. We really got into this idea of a gestus, right? Which is a gesture that demonstrates to the audience who the character is, right? There's a big like, right?
Yeah.
Then you have all. I really believe in the clown, right? This unsocialized thing. Where you'll do things in your unsocialized body that directly impact your characterization, right? If you don't have the inhibitions of your life, right, you can then create a gestus, right, that then symbolize, like for instance, or it's the how, right? We haven't started talking about actions, right? But it's the how it gets done, which is extremely important, right? That's the part where people go, yes or no, right? Or they go, I don't know, right? But if you've laid in the decorum, right? If you've laid in the natural behavior of this thing, all soldiers move the same. Is that true? No. All soldiers move the same sometimes. And what are the times in which they do that? That's the part I have to capture, right? And then you have to understand that what we do is a heightened sense of reality, right? It's heightened text. It's heightened. No one writes the movie about the boring days, right? It's the boring day that turns into the very exciting day, right? And when you get to the very exciting day, everything changes, everything goes, right? Which leads to the objective. As long as you're pursuing that objective and you've built all these things in, right? And you've built them in so much that you don't even remember them anymore, right?
That's the thing,
they just become you, right? It's not necessary, unless you love the game, unless you love this, it's very difficult to take it this way. You know what I mean? Like to take it this way, you know, because I've worked with a lot of actors who don't have that. And those actors are probably perhaps more open to me or have a different experience from me. They just go at it a different way. My way of doing it is just my way of doing it. You know, I enjoy it, you know, because it also allows me to go into myself and go, oh, what would I do then? What would I do then? What would I do then? Yeah.
Yeah. But does it ever come to a point from doing so many of these roles in this full way where you ask yourself, I mean, this might be a weird question, but just like, who am I though?
Quite the opposite.
Oh,
right? Quite the opposite, because that's why acting to me is the greatest, it's the most, maybe not the greatest, but it's definitely the most adventurous career one can attempt to participate in, because it is a search. You're a journeyman, right? And maybe you're lucky enough where you can just live in LA and shoot in LA. Maybe you're fortunate enough, I wouldn't say that's fortunate, but maybe that's the game. You know, maybe you just play characters that are close to you. My perspective on it is that I believe every character lives in me and I live in every character. And so what happens from that is I learn from each role I play, right? Each role I play shows me another part of myself, right? That's what I get, right? It's not for the audience, that's just what I get. And so I begin to learn more about myself, you know, through every role. And so when after a movie, you know, you grow exponentially. through the process that I'm working, that I'm trying to explain. I don't know how well I'm doing it, but you have to first deal with yourself, right? You have to know how far the delta is between you and the character, you know? And for me in particular, I look for a level of difficulty, right? If the character seems difficult, if I don't understand them, if the world is crazy, I'm in.
And you said about this character in Magazine Dreams that there are a lot of secrets here, and that's what you responded to. And it sounds like that is like a playground then, right? Where there's more possibility of expressing some of these.
Yes.
If they're not overt.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And the physical transformation that you were already on a way. I mean, you didn't look like me when you started doing it. You were already working out and doing and working your body for other roles.
Yes, sir.
But this had to go to another level,
right,
for this. But it seems like you're the kind of person that actually is not scared of that, right? It's all part of the of the work. And actually, when you have to do something like this, it actually seems like it might even be the opposite of a challenge in a way.
Right.
It might be like, oh, this is my full
gift.
Full way. Yeah, gift.
It's a gift.
Where I could fully immerse into the work because it's about body too.
That's right. Well, a big thing that I believe in, like the mind body, it's mind body. It's not mind and body, right? I believe that in life, but for the work, it's not imagination, mind, but no. When you go through a training program, at some point, like when you first start, it's all separate, right? You get your voice and speech. You get your voice, you got your speech. You got your clown, you got your combat. You got your acting, you got your other acting, you got your other acting. That's by design, I think, that they separate it. But then as you begin to move through the program, everything begins to come together, right? It's a holistic approach. And so, again, one of the things that we always talk about the given circumstances. Who, what, when, where, right? These are the givens. How deep can you go into those givens, right? And if you go deep, you find things that are, in my mind, that are absolutely gold mines, right? And if you can meld those two together, a person that's built a certain way thinks a certain way, right? One of the beautiful blessings of Magazine Dreams is that I began to look at the workouts, right, as rehearsals, right? As I began to grow my body and get comfortable with it, and not wearing much clothes, like, which I wasn't a swimmer, you know what I mean? I wasn't used to being exposed in that way, you know what I mean? Just wasn't, right? But then you begin to train with your shirt off. You begin to train in shorts. You then come out of it in the middle of the gym. Like all these things. Who is that, right? That's Killian, right? I'm now doing the doing, right? I'm doing what he does. Right? Okay, cool. The weight is too heavy for me, right? Which means it's too heavy for Killian. What is Killian gonna do? Because he's gotta lift it, right? The immense pressure in the explosion of emotion that's needed sometimes to lift that weight, right? That is Killian. And I've come right up against him, right? And I can remember that moment, right? I can remember that moment. And then the actor can then go, okay, that's what that is. That's what that feels like, right? So things become one, right? The body is an integral part of the storytelling. You can look at someone and go, no matter what their weight is, are they a soldier or not, right? Because of the way they carry their body, and the way they breathe, right? Because they breathe from the way they think, So, yeah, it's all together, it's all together. The objective is with all these processes, is to build a ladder. Each process I tried to explain is a rung in the ladder. Yeah. Right? And my goal is to build the ladder as high as possible. Right? So when they say action, I jump. Right? And what you can find, and what I found in drama school, where you're supposed to fail, even at work, you're supposed to fail, right? Is that sometimes you don't build the ladder high enough, right? And so you get to the middle of the movie and you splat, right? You don't have enough in there, but you build it higher. Again, Jacob's ladder. You're building it higher. They say action, you jump, right? And hopefully when they say cut, you haven't hit the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That might be in the can. That might be in the movie. You know what I mean? Because when you hit the ground, you're acting.
What do you need on a set to facilitate this? The set has to be, and the director. Let's ask it that way. Do you need everyone to be on board to preserve the environment for you to do this?
No. Let's first talk about the director-actor relationship, and then we can talk about the set. Because you, as a director, the director has to understand they're the head coach, they're Phil Jackson, it is their show. You know what I mean? As number one on the call sheet, I like to think as number one on the call sheet as number 100, right? Which means you've got all these people you have got to hold up, right? And you're the foundation of it, right? The top of it is our director. He sees everything, right? The bottom of it is your lead actor. They've got to hold everything, okay? So what I need from my director and what I try to facilitate between my director is very much the only person I'm going to speak my homework to is my director. Not on the day, okay? We know what Monday through Friday is at work. Let's get together Saturday, go for a walk, have a chat, you know what I mean? You'll see more of me pop out versus, dealing with the character, because that's not always so fun. And then, Sunday, I just a little text, hey man, make sure we're on the same page, ma'am, what do you think about this? This is because I don't want them to be surprised in any way, right? Because we're people, you know what I mean? And the director, it's occupational decorum, right? Yeah. That the director has to have control. If they don't have control, we're all in trouble. And if they don't have control, there's no trust, right? So what I try to build with my directors, and what I believe I've done fairly successfully, is that where I go, I'm here with you, I'm showing you, I'm telling you everything I'm doing, to the point at some point, with Magazine Dreams, I sent the voice recording of Killian to Elijah Bynum, and we talked about it. He was like, wow, you sure? And I was like, I am sure, I am sure. And he said, oh, I'm not so sure. I said, okay, but I'm sure. So either tell me to change it, and I'll give you another cut. I had to do the same thing for Kang and all the variants. I don't want any surprises. Because you hired me. But I'm not the one that's going to come to set. Right. Still your brother, still your pal. Yeah. But that's not who's coming to set, because this film's not about Jonathan Majors and his life. You know what I mean? It's about Killian, or it's about Kang, or it's about Damien, or it's about any of the characters. Now, as far as set goes, I do a few things on set that allow me to stay in my space, right? For instance, I'm constantly running, much to my costume designer's chagrin.
Literally running.
Literally running.
Oh, wow.
Right. Well, again, it goes back to the toxi, right? That I want my body loose. Yeah. Right. I want my breath disoriented, right? Yeah. That way, when I step in, I'm saying the lines, right? And I'm using the breath I need to say the lines. And if I'm doing that, and only that, Killian's talking, right? The character is speaking. I also set the mood. I like to ring a bell, right? And what I mean by ringing a bell, I bring my music to set, because everyone on set is an artist in their own way, right? We all need to be in the same world, right? You've helped build the world. You've helped dress the world. You're helping lighting the world. You are shooting the world. I'm going to inhabit the world. Let me give you a sense of where I'm coming from, right? Yeah. So sometimes I'll come out and I start from the moment I get to work. Like, here's the music, and it's in some ways related to the scene. It's some ways related to the character's inner life, And it's the best thing on set when you see someone bobbing their head to your music, you know what I mean? And they know you're coming, and you tap them on the shoulder, and this and that. They wire you up. So we all understand what it is we're doing here, And only once was I like, let me turn this off. But yeah, that's a process, right? And through that's vulnerability. Also, I always work out loud. Right? I don't hide the process. Once I'm at work, I'm not hiding the process. I've seen you hang this light 100 times and you're not getting it right. And now you move over there, right? Boo, boo, and now you got it, right? if I'm in a moment and I'm like, what is this? You know, and I'll just sit down, you know, with the music and I'm just kind of going through it. Mind you, there's no paper. So I'm just there. I'm like, yeah, that's it. And they're watching me.
Yeah, you're not afraid of
I'm
that.
not afraid.
Yeah.
Like I'm not afraid of that. Like, this is the process, right? This is how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is how it's made, you know? And also like just being connected with my castmates, right? Like when you hear the music, you know he's coming. You know I'm coming to set. You know what I mean? And the other thing is, they don't have to worry about like when we're working, you don't have to worry about knowing your lines, right? Because I don't believe in lines. I believe in the sound of the moment. Now, I mean, it's a profession, so we all have expectations and professional, decorum. You know your lines, right? But there comes moments when it's like we transcend the lines, right? And I'm there with my scene partner, and we're having a conversation, and say they go up, but I know where we are because we're not shooting a movie, right? I know the given circumstances. You know the given circumstances. So then I'll come in and throw this at you here, and then you catch that, and you go, oh, great. We're here. Blah. That's the other part of it. Like that old school theater company stuff. Like the audience is here. We can't stop. You know what I mean? That's the other thing. I very rarely, I don't know if I actually know if I have, but I very rarely stop to take. You know what I mean? Unless someone's not there. You know what I mean? Like we're like, okay, we can't. I can't get you out of this. You know what I mean? You can't get me out of this because you didn't reset, and I forgot to reset, so we got to stop. You know what I mean? Like we can't tell the story.
But otherwise, you go.
Otherwise, you go, right? And there is an action. There is no cut. You know what I mean? There is no cut. You just go, and you just keep telling the story. Just keep telling the story.
My friend, the great actor James Padrick, called you an athlete of the heart.
Wow. Humbly, I think that's high praise.
You had to, for this role, eat a certain way.
Oh yeah.
The way the character would have to eat because you're building your body.
Yes.
And so you're literally feeding Jonathan, but it's really you're feeding
Killian.
the character, and it's creating the body that he uses as an athlete. What do you, Jonathan, feed yourself for your acting instrument?
Nature. Beauty, people, but people in a different way where I just like to be amongst them, Don't really like to, I used to not really like to be around them, but I like to be amongst them. Does that make sense? Great texts, museums, everything we're doing has been done before. Not better, not worse, it's just been done before. I love going to museums and seeing worlds of old and seeing how, oh, that's not that old. I do that same thing. I stand the exact same way, love, you know what I mean? My dogs, my buddies, For me, acting it's a job, right? But it's also a philosophy, and philosophy transcends from, a career, like even now, like sitting with you, I go, oh, talking and listening, Am I crazy for that? I don't know, but I mean, does a surgeon not look at bodies differently than a firefighter, right? Does a firefighter not look at fire differently than a, lifeguard? You know what I mean? It's what I've dedicated it's my occupation, my ministry, and my philosophy. That's how I move through the world. So there's living, living feeds it. That's the thing for me where it's not like, oh, now you're doing a role, now everything has to go away or this and this. No. There's a certain amount of focus that happens in that truncated time for preparation. But that's the way life should be. If I was working as a barista at Starbucks, there's a ritual, right? You put your apron on, you put your hat on, you put your pen on, and you do all these things with intention, right? For the objective, which is to serve the best bloody piece of, chocolate cake and espresso this guy ever had. If you feel that's your calling. I believe it is some baristas' callings to do that. I believe some actors act because it's a great paycheck and they like to be liked, I act because it's the only way I know to interact with the world and to do the most good.
Jonathan Majors, you must come back on this show.
I'm coming back, man.
That's what I want to hear.
Guaranteed.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.